Today I want to discuss another sweetheart deal that Ontario taxpayers can't afford. When we raised questions in the legislature concerning Orange and the potential waste and abuse of taxpayer dollars, the Premier, the Minister of Health, and the Minister of Finance brushed those warnings aside and insisted that all was well. We now know that ignoring those warnings allowed millions more of taxpayers' dollars to be wasted, and given the irresponsible decisions of Orange management over that time on everything from equipment purchases to changes in launch protocol, that failure to respond has also compromised the delivery of essential ambulance services. And I've said repeatedly that given the daily revelations of the actions of senior management at Orange, the police should have been called in long ago to initiate their own probe. That still has not happened. But today I want to draw attention to yet another example of the McGuinty government ignoring our warning that another scandal is brewing, this time at the Ministry of Transportation and its rapidly expanding agency, Metrolinx. On November 22nd last year, a letter was delivered to the Minister of Finance and to the Minister of Transportation, in which they were advised of concerns relating to the awarding of a contract to implement an electronic fare card system on the TTC under very questionable circumstances. Specifically, that letter questioned why the Ministry of Transportation, through its agency Metrolinx, was coercing the City of Toronto and the TTC to enter into an agreement with the Presto+Accenture consortium at a cost of more than $300 million higher than a competing bid. The letter pointed out that the competing bid from ACS Xerox had gone through an open public tendering process, was in compliance with all specifications of the tender document as set out by the TTC, and would save the taxpayers more than $300 million. In addition, the ACS open payment system would accept credit cards and debit cards rather than restrict commuters to the Presto card, which is a single restricted card system based on outdated technology. On December 7th, I again raised the issue by way of a question directed to the Premier during question period. I referred to that November letter and specifically asked why the Ministry of Transportation was forcing the TTC into a deal with Presto+Accenture. I again pointed out that the TTC had made its intentions known, that it wants to proceed with the ACS Xerox proposal. Not only would it save more than $300 million in capital costs, but there would be an additional savings annually of some $16 million in annual operating costs over the term of a 10-year contract, bringing the total savings to taxpayers to almost $500 million. That question was again brushed aside with a glib assurance that all was well. Well, we contend that all is not well. And the more questions we ask, the more concerned we become that we have yet one more example of the McGuinty government refusing to act when what we see is a blatant waste of taxpayers' dollars and outright mismanagement. It has now been confirmed that the Ministry of Transportation is not only strong-arming the TTC by offering to pay the more than $300 million in capital costs to implement that Presto system, but has also threatened to withhold other infrastructure funding, including gas tax revenue, if it didn't cooperate. I've been told by TTC commissioners and City of Toronto councillors that they consider this nothing short of political blackmail. At a time when the government is facing serious fiscal challenges and is looking to Don Drummond to help them find efficiencies and savings in the delivery of government services, we find it disturbing that this same government is turning a blind eye to the blatant waste of almost $500 million of taxpayers' money. We're also disappointed that the TTC have allowed themselves to become complicit in such a blatant waste of tax dollars. The TTC could say no and could have and should have exposed this strong-arming on the part of the Ministry of Transportation. So the more questions we ask, the more disturbing this file becomes. Here are some of the questions that the Minister of Transportation and the TTC commissioners have a responsibility to answer. First, why, after an extensive public tendering process by the TTC for an electronic fare card system, were the results of that process overturned by the Ministry of Transportation with a directive from Metrolinx to the TTC that it must deal with the Presto+Accenture consortium to implement its fare card system? Second, why did the Ministry of Transportation, through Metrolinx, offer to pay the more than $300 million of capital costs to implement that system, when the competing ACS Xerox proposal would have saved that $300 million? Third, given the fact that ACS Xerox proposal was the TTC's preferred option, was publicly tendered, was fully compliant with all conditions of the tender document, is based on a state-of-the-art open payment system technology, why would the Ministry of Transportation insist on spending that additional $500 million on an inferior system? Fourth, why did the TTC so readily comply with this coercion? Fifth, who are the players behind the scenes at Presto+Accenture, Metrolinx, and the Ministry of Transportation who have orchestrated this deal, and who stands to gain from this $500 million overpayment? Sixth, Presto+Accenture are promising a next-generation system that will do what the ACS Xerox system can do today. How many more millions of dollars will it take to development costs for the Presto+Accenture group to actually develop a technology that is already in existence today? And finally, how much does this e-transit card file have in common with the e-health file that ended up costing taxpayers more than $1 billion? We believe the taxpayers of this province deserve answers to these questions, and we're calling on the Minister of Transportation to help us get those answers rather than continue to defend the indefensible. I'll take questions.
Did his administration not do their homework, or do you feel that he's also added to this pressure on the TTC to accept something that they shouldn't have?
No, I think the issue was made very clear, and that is that for some inexplicable reason, the Ministry of Transportation insisted that that Presto card become part of all of those agreements that were put in place between the City of Toronto and the Ministry of Transportation. It's fundamentally wrong. And so that's why I say, whether it's councillors or whether it's TTC commissioners, they are saying they felt strong-armed, coerced, and essentially blackmailed into agreeing to this unconscionable proposal that's put before them. They have an opportunity to put in place an advanced technology e-card system that, by the way, will integrate with the existing Presto card system that's now in place in the GTA. It's not a matter of either or. It's a matter of the City of Toronto being able to get that card system for $300 million less than they're being forced to accept through Presto+Accenture. It's fundamentally wrong.
Is there a sense of vindication, because these are things that you guys running against him, and warned all along the way that these things were not sustainable, could not be afforded?
Well, look, there would not be a need for the Drummond report if it wasn't for the mismanagement and the overspending of the McGuinty government over the last number of years. We warned time and time again that the expenditures, that the deficits that were being run is going to bring us to a point where this province will be up against the wall, and we're there now. This issue that I'm raising here is a perfect backdrop to why the Drummond report was necessary. Because time and time again, ministers of the Crown, the Premier was made aware of this $500 million of overspend that is absolutely unnecessary. Now we're calling in an economist to come and tell Mr. McGuinty what every basic homeowner knows, and that is that you cannot spend more than you have. We'll be interested to see what Mr. Drummond has to say, but I'm sure that if Mr. Drummond was aware of this, this would be his 401st recommendation, to say get on with a proposal that costs $300 million less and gives you an advanced technology.
Do you, from the comments you've heard so far from the government, do you see any indication that they have any appetite for serious cuts to their spending?
We'll have to wait and see. I don't believe so. And again, the reason that I say that is I come back to the issue I brought forward today. If in fact the government was serious about wanting to save money, deliver public service efficiently, they would not have turned this issue aside. They would have looked into it immediately and say, what is wrong with this? Why would the Ministry of Transportation be willing to pay $300 million that'll simply go into a black hole that's unnecessary when you can get a better technology for $300 million less? Surely that's fundamental to what the government is attempting to do, at least in word. Their actions belie what they're telling us that they want to do.
Well, do you believe that, then what do you see as the reason for the Presto decision? They certainly are, the government argued very passionately for it. You hinted that there might be connections or something back there. What do you think is the reason that they would choose the Presto option then?
Well, there is no logical reason why they would, which is why we're here today, which is why I raised it in the legislature. There is something wrong in this file. And you know, when the e-health issue, the e-health scandal was first raised, we had the same issue, the same attitude on the part of the government. Everything is fine. When we initially raised the orange issue months ago, the minister's response was everything is fine. I now have raised this, everything is fine. Look, why is it that the government feels they have to cover up what is wrong in their ministries? The ministers and the premier should be the first ones to say, my goodness, what is going on here? Let's look into this. Let's call people up on the carpet and say, why are you doing this? They're not willing to do that. There's a mentality on the part of this government that they have to cover up, they have to defend the indefensible. And that's why the province of Ontario is in the state that we're in today. So, who's benefiting? I don't know. But it's very interesting that some of the same people who were involved in the e-health scandal, where multi-millions of dollars were involved in redeveloping or trying to develop an e-health card system, e-health record system, are now at the table saying, oh no, let's not accept an existing card system that already has that technology. Why don't you let us, Accenture, develop that electronic card system? And by the way, it's going to cost you multi-millions of dollars more. Who is benefiting from this? Not the taxpayer. And that's why I'm calling on the minister and the premier to say we have something brewing here. Let's not wait again until 6 months pass or a year pass to uncover through affidavits what happened. Let's move in there now and make sure that we protect the taxpayer.
I'm sorry, one last minute. Do you think that these revelations around possibly Presto, but certainly Orange, e-health, even the water slide at Ontario Place undermines the public's confidence in making cuts, or the necessity? They may question the necessity of making cuts? Well,
I think what they'll undermine is the government's credibility. And when the public sees that there are these blatant areas where multi-millions of dollars can be saved, this is low-hanging fruit. This is something that you don't need someone to be paid thousands of dollars a day to figure out. This is basic. And I think when the public sees that on the one hand, the government is ignoring all of this waste and is going after some of their basic services, what they lose confidence in is the government and its ability to be stewards, good stewards of the public purse.